Canada. Today is Friday, 12th January 2018. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. In the headlines tonight, nationally, Dominica's Prime Minister has thanked the Federation for coming to his country's aid following Hurricane Maria. Internationally, 73 people have been buried in a mass funeral as Nigeria's farmland dispute worsens. And in sport, the CPL Premier League says international viewership increased by 25% in 2017. We have the details of these stories, the weather and Carib update all ahead in SKN News Now Evening Edition. Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Roosevelt Scarrett, has written to the government of the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis to extend gratitude for the Federation's assistance and support after the southern Caribbean island was ravaged by Hurricane Maria in September last year. In the letter, Prime Minister Scarrett underscored St. Kitts and Nevis's dispatch of humanitarian aid to Dominica and the Federation's pledge of $1 million to its recovery and rebuilding efforts. St. Kitts and Nevis also opened up the Robert L. Bradshaw International Airport in the aftermath of the storm as a staging platform for the Dominica relief effort. The Federation also ensured that students from storm-affected countries, including Dominica, who were registered for Caribbean Examination Council exams this year, could complete their education here free of cost. Additionally, the country's medical facilities opened their doors to offer healthcare services to storm-affected persons in need of medical treatment following Hurricane Maria. In his letter, Mr. Scarrett, who has become exceedingly vocal on the region's need to come together on the issue of climate change, went on that the particularly active 2017 season and its impact drive home the need for the region to continue to advocate for the international community to take definitive action on climate change, as small island states which make up the region are most likely to be worst affected. Scarrett continued that the recently signed Paris Agreement, which addresses climate change and other issues impacting global environmental concerns, hinges on the international community meeting their obligations, including funding programs for building resilience in small island developing states, and particularly those which have fallen victim to the consequences of climate change. The government of the Republic of China Taiwan has handed over the Vegetable, Fruit and Upland Crop Quality and Safety Improvement Project Facility, or VFUC-QSI, and a check of US $241,000 for the Eco Park Maintenance Project to the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The ceremony on Thursday marks Taiwan's latest gesture of support toward agricultural development in the Federation. Prior to the handover, the Taiwanese provided technical training and support to local personnel who will now take over operation of VFUC-QSI. To date, the implementation of the VFUC-QSI has been instrumental in supporting the activities of the Ministry of Agriculture in ensuring the success of local crops. It's also been instrumental in boosting the confidence of the business community, particularly hotels, in the ability of local agricultural sector to service their needs with high-quality produce. Ministry of Agriculture officials confirmed yesterday that approximately 98% of the food produced in the Federation meets quality standards for consumption. VFUC-QSI was initiated in 2014 with the objective of improving the safety and quality standards of crops being produced and acting as a support system to farmers and the general public. According to project manager Dr. Augustine Nwosu, since the inception of the project, over 4,000 crops and 450 samples of soil have been tested, as well as the construction of 2 composite demonstration farms in the Federation. He also noted that the project has improved local agricultural capacity through training, seminars, and workshops facilitated by both local and international experts. He also disclosed that an online soil facility platform, introduced recently under a new Geographical Information System or GIS, is being developed. Meanwhile, the contribution toward the eco-park is expected to be used to support the operation of the facility as a strategic sustainability plan is formulated by the Ministries of Agriculture and Tourism. Education officers on NEWS today completed a 3-day training workshop hosted by the Nevis Island Administration Department of Education. Under the theme Education Officers Appraisal for Growth and Development Program, the workshop was facilitated by international education consultant Dr. Judy Brown. The workshop's goal was to prepare the officers for the implementation of the Education Sector Plan 2017 to 2021 for St. Kitts and Nevis, which was launched in December last year. This is the first phase of a greater plan for increasing training opportunities for education professionals. According to Kevin Barrett, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education on NEWS, as part of the Education Sector Plan rollout, other stakeholders, particularly those engaged in hands-on education including principals, teachers, and eventually students themselves, will be exposed to additional training opportunities. Over the course of the 3-day activity, Dr. Brown led sessions in which the roles and responsibility of education officers were defined, the importance of an appraisal system was identified, and the importance of educators creating and following through on long and short-term goals. The sessions also assisted education officers in their professional development as they will leave with a clearer understanding of how the education system works in relation to their responsibilities. This in turn will enable the participants to develop and implement initiatives within the department that will be unique to the community in which they work and advance education on the island. Meanwhile, as education officers navigated their training program, an additional opportunity for educators has been announced. The Human Development, Education and Employment Secretariat of the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development is staging a development training course targeted at secondary school level teaching professionals. The third edition of the Inter-American Teacher Education Network course, Critical Thinking in Action, Sustainable Elegy in the Science Classroom, is free of cost and open to secondary school teachers from all OAS member states. The goal of the course is to guide educators on how they can encourage critical thinking in their students who study science and related subjects. The course material was developed within the framework of the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas of the Department of Sustainable Development. The deadline for registration for the course is January 21st and can be completed by visiting www.campusready10.org. That's www.campusready10.org. And finally, this evening, St. Kitts and Nevis has received more tourism accolades from leading international publications. Joining the Bloomberg list, which placed St. Kitts and Nevis among the 22 must-visit destinations in 2018, is the New York Times, which ranked the Federation at number 4 on its list of 52 places to go this year. The New York Times' 13th annual placement highlighted the regional bonding which took place following Hurricanes Irma and Maria, noting that the majority of the region was unaffected by the storms which wreaked havoc on Dominica, Barbuda, St. Martin, Puerto Rico, and the British and U.S. Virgin Islands. It continued that the region came together to ensure the survival of the region's tourism industry. This is in fact the case, as many tourism and hospitality professionals who found themselves out of employment following the storms have been able to find work in other islands and on the mainland United States. This effort to support displaced persons was boosted by the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, playing a key role in the development of an online job bank which features employment opportunities in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Dominican Republic, St. Martin, the United States of America, and other countries. Travelers whose plans were affected by the storms are also being encouraged to visit other islands, as their support will ultimately benefit persons across the tourism-dependent region. Thrillist, a lifestyle magazine targeted at men, also identified Nevis, the birthplace of one of America's founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, as a must-visit destination. And that wraps up our national developments this evening. However, still to come in this evening's presentation of SKN News Now, international developments, sport, and weather. There's been a mass burial in Nigeria for 73 people killed in fighting between Fulani herdsmen and farmers. They've been locked in conflict for decades over the use of grazing land. Attacks and counterattacks between farmers and cattle herders in Nigeria have grown worse over the past 5 years. Last year alone, at least 1,500 people died and more than 100,000 were displaced. Ahmed Idris reports.
In our country,
a solemn ceremony for victims of recent violence between herdsmen and farmers. As the dead are brought in coffins on open trucks, emotions run high. Survivors say the attacks were carried out by herdsmen. Stephen Zion, a member of a local militia formed to confront the nomads, says he was left for dead when their camp was raided.
We were in the camp, in the primary school.
We were in the camp. Around 5 a.m. without warning, without information, we started to hear gunshots. They were shooting. We didn't have any rifle or ammunition.
Mary is a mother of two. She's alive but suffered a deep machete cut to the face. Attacks and counterattacks between farmers and cattle herders have grown worse in Nigeria over the past 5 years. Last year alone, at least 1,500 have died and more than 100,000 displaced. As the 73 victims of the recent violence are buried here, the Nigerian government is sending soldiers to stop the killings. At the heart of the problem is access to land. A changing climate is forcing the migration of nomads from the north to the south in search of pasture. Existing lands reserved for grazing have been overtaken by farmlands and development as the population grows, and this has created conflicts between farmers and cattle herders. Security forces have announced arrests on both sides, and some states have enforced a ban on open grazing.
I know the size of my state and what land is where. To me, there is no 2 hectares of land, that you can put as grazing reserve. So it cannot work here. The whole land is occupied.
But the herdsmen say the law was in bad faith, meant to extinguish their way of life.
That grazing is
Grazing is the Fulani's legal right as Nigerians. That's the way they were brought up. When they insist on ranching, they should be provided with ranches. If there is no provision for ranches, how do you want them to live?
Efforts by the central government to demarcate areas exclusively for grazing is being resisted in some states. This conflict has been going on for half a century. With the rise in casualties and the scramble for land and water, many Nigerians say they believe the violence will get worse before it gets better.
A small group of United States senators say they reached a compromise on immigration reform, but it has yet to win the support of President Donald Trump. According to several reports, Trump made vulgar remarks about Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries during the discussions and objected to immigrants entering the U.S. from those nations. He suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries like Norway. Kirsten Salumi explains.
Days after President Trump called on lawmakers to find a compromise on immigration reforms, a small bipartisan group of 6 senators say they've done just that. The agreement was expected to include funding for border security, protections for undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children, and changes to the way the State Department approves visas. But in a private meeting, a proposal to restore protections to immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and certain African countries who were until recently protected from deportation, reportedly prompted the president to question, why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? He then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries like Norway, whose prime minister he met on Wednesday.
That's the racist element. Norwegians are white. They're Northern Europeans. He was referring earlier in his vulgar comment to Africans and Haitians who are mostly of African descent. These are racist comments. He said things like this before when he talked about Nigerians who won't go back to live in huts, and he talked about Haitians who bring AIDS to the United States. These are all confirmations of what a lot of people have long suspected, that he harbors racism.
Republican Representative Mia Love, a Haitian American, responded on Twitter saying the president's comments are unkind, divisive, elitist, and fly in the face of our nation's values. This behavior is unacceptable from the leader of our nation.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime,
they're rapists.
It's not the first time the president has spoken disparagingly of immigrants, and his spokesperson didn't deny the comments. Certain Washington politicians choose to fight for foreign countries. President Trump will always fight for the American people, he said. President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions that make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation. The president says he wants a merit-based immigration system, not one based on family connections or a lottery. And his comments suggest he's not yet ready to accept the compromise reached by senators.
Still to come in this evening's news presentation, sport, the weather, and Carib update. In sport this evening, the Hero Caribbean Premier League, or CPL, has continued its growth during the 2017 season with combined broadcast and digital viewership of almost 200 million. This represents an increase of 25% on last season, further cementing the Hero CPL class as one of the fastest growing cricket tournaments in the world, according to the organizers. The largest audience share was in India, where broadcast viewership increased by 19% to more than 97 million. The next largest broadcasting market was the Caribbean, where there was a total viewership figure of 48 million for the tournament that took place between 4th August and 9 September 2017. As well as success in India and the Caribbean, there was also a significant increase in the United States of America, where there was more than a 100% lift in viewership on the figures from 2016 Hero CPL. There was also a further increase in the digital viewership for the tournament, with 25% of the total audience coming through various digital channels, which is a testament to the innovative nature of the Hero CPL's online offerings. Damian O'Donoghue, the Chief Executive Officer of Hero CPL, said with continued year-on-year growth, the CPL goes into the 28th season with momentum to secure an even larger audience for the next edition of the tournament. He continued that his organization was delighted to see the biggest party in sport being watched by more people than ever and expected that the trend will continue into this season. Starting in 2013, the Hero Caribbean Premier League, or CPL, is a franchise-based T20 format cricket tournament that combines cricket with a carnival atmosphere. Combining broadcast and digital viewership of over 197 million fans who watched in the 27th season, it made it one of the fastest growing leagues in world cricket. Trinidad and Tobago Knight Riders are the current Hero CPL champions, with the Barbados Tridents, Guyana Amazon Warriors, St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots, St. Lucia Stars and Jamaica Tallowers making up the rest of the league teams. And with that look at sport, we now turn attention to this evening's weather forecast. Over St. Kitts and Nevis tonight, conditions will be mostly cloudy with a moderate or 60% chance of showers. Seas are moderate to rough with swells of 1.8 to 2.4 meters or 6 to 8 feet. Small craft operators are advised to exercise caution. However, a warning remains in effect for sea bathers against rough sea conditions. Winds are easterly at 14 to 18 miles per hour. The sea level pressure is 1,018 millibars or 30.06 inches. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:38 a.m. And that brings us to the end of this evening's news presentation. Before we go, a recap of today's top stories. Nationally, Dominica's Prime Minister has thanked the Federation for coming to his country's aid following Hurricane Maria. Internationally, 73 people have been buried in a mass funeral as Nigeria's farmland dispute worsens. And in sport, the CPL Premier League says international viewership increased by 25% in 2017. I've been your presenter, Ebony Brandon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Still to come, Carib Update, followed by DJ Yardi. Good evening.